Hey all, Bill Bachman here for drumworkout.com. I have another blog X for X date, as I like to say. This one is going to be on not just marching percussion, but ensemble techniques, how to deal with sound delay when you are playing outdoors, especially if you're doing a marching band, a drum corps, because it's quite a challenge to get everything to sound together at the press box. Now, a little bit of history. I was a co-captain head with Matt Savage back in Bluecoats in the 97 and 98, maybe before some of you guys were born. And I ended up doing a whole lot of ensemble stuff and figured out a lot of tips and tricks on how to make everything work. So sometimes I'd sit on the drum major podium, but usually up in the little crow's nest tower kind of hype. So anyway, I did a whole lot of stuff in order to just make things line up. So when you are on the field during an ensemble rehearsal, I remember how it was when I was marching. We'd do the same thing again and again and again. And I didn't really know why, and where I was standing, I didn't do anything differently. So now, in retrospect, I understand how this works. And so this is a little presentation I used to do back when I was at Bluecoats to help people understand during the ensemble rehearsal why we're doing what we do and why it's important that you do everything the exact same way every time in order to give us a true test. Now, the little bit of science behind this, sound is kind of slow. It only travels 761.2 miles per hour in average barometric conditions. Excellent. All right, so that seems fast, but it's actually very, very slow. So what we're going to do today here is we're going to hear how it works with different scenarios, different listening scenarios, different drum major scenarios, and we're going to figure out some of the things that work and don't work, and we're going to test some theory behind it. Now, when you make sound, you can think of it like a tennis ball, just for a visual. Imagine when I clap my hands, I throw a tennis ball 761.2 miles an hour in all directions universally. So if I'm a soloist and I play all by myself, someone up in the press box, which is the audience, that's your main audience where you're focusing your show to, they're going to hear it just fine. But if there's a bunch of me in different places, imagine me throwing a tennis ball right here next to the camera and then someone further back there throwing a tennis ball. In order for those two tennis balls to hit somebody in the press box at the same time, pretty much like that, we have to do some stuff to get it together. So to help me out today, I have 3 of my students who are going to play quarter notes, which is excellent. So come on over here, y'all. Here we have Ashley, Jack, and Rachel. They may look like your average students, but they're actually champions. So first of all, we're going to do a little control test so you guys can see that yes, they know what they're doing. We're going to have each one of them tap off and just play that quarter note. All right, so here you go. Go ahead, Ashley. Go ahead, Jack. And Rachel. Okay. That was actually pretty good. They got ears, they're pretty well trained. So you know we're not going to have a lot of flukes in this test. So now what we're going to do is we're going to spread them out. We're going to have Rachel stay right there on the 50, front sideline, and Jack, young Jack, is going to get on the center X way out there, and Rachel is going to go all the way to the back sideline, once again on the 50. So, let's probably fast forward. Okay, now in scenario 1, this is where the drum major is in charge. And a lot of people think that's how it works, but having everybody on the field watch the drum major's hands is an excellent way to guarantee that you will never fall apart while you're never really together. All right, so here we go. I'm going to conduct, they're going to play on 1. All right, let's do it one more time, and again. So there's piccata, right? So basically, visually, they all throw their tennis ball at the same time. So you're hearing Rachel, Jack, Ashley, one after another. Now, sometimes I see the drum major actually count off out loud as they can from the front of the field. That's actually twice as bad, because now my voice, if it was a tennis ball, I would throw it, Rachel would hear it immediately, Jack would hear it a while later, and then finally Ashley will hear it, and then only when they hear it do they play. So that should be about double as slow. So to do that, we're going to have Rachel tap off, and everybody's going to play with what they hear. Go ahead. All right, so there it is. Mathematically twice as long. Pick a dot. First one is pick a dot. Now pick a dot. Now, if you think about throwing the tennis ball and listening back is what's ideal. So let's get halfway to where we want to be. So now we'll have Jack tap off in the middle, and what's going to happen is his sound's going to come forward, Rachel's going to hear it and just add right onto it, kind of like she's there watching Jack's tennis ball come and she throws hers at the same time, so those two are going to sound together. Now Jack's tap, the sound goes backwards to Ashley, and then she plays, so we're going to hear her clearly late. So Jack, go ahead, you tap off this time. There it is, butt up, right? So now the first two are together just like we called out, and then we got the lagger in the back. Now what we're going to do is something that makes sense and is smart and logistically on. We're going to have Ashley tap off all the way in the back, and so she is going to basically initiate the time, and then Jack waits for her ball and throws his with hers. Rachel waits for those two coming side by side and throws hers. So now suddenly it's going to sound together. So, Ashley. There you go, right? All right, so the way to do that with your ensemble is basically have the drum line generally in charge of tempo. Now, it's not that drummers have huge egos. Some may work on that, right? All right, but the instruments are so ridiculously staccato in order for 30-second notes to articulate, there's no room for error. You can't adjust. So generally, the center snare is the guy who just plays and lays out the time, and he's going to be solid as a rock and extremely well trained, and then the whole battery is going to be well trained, knowing how to keep time, a la tracking and such. So they're going to have habitual time where they're dead on. Because usually the drum line is further backfield such that their pulse pocket, they set it, they drive the whole bus. Their sound goes forward, and then anyone in front of them listens back and just sort of, here comes the battery, the flute adds their tennis balls with it such that they all arrive on top. All right, so if the battery is basically behind you, please don't watch, just listen back, because they're feeding you the definition of where the time is being initiated from behind them. Now, that leaves a problem. You end up with people out to the sides, okay? Now, if the battery's in the middle, near the back, and they play, imagine a tennis ball going forward toward the press box, and sound goes all directions, so it's going out laterally, and then these people hear it. So if they have to wait for that delay, of usually more than 10 yards, their sound is going to be late by the time it gets up to the press box. So that's where the drum major comes in. Your drum major, a lot of people think they are super hosses that just run the show and bring the emotion and drive the... Usually they watch feet, right? So in order for the ensemble to communicate to the people on the outside peripheral areas where time is being initiated, they will watch the feet. So Ashley back there, if she was marching, drum major and center snare, or the center of that mass, pulse pocket, drum line's mass, whoever's sort of driving it back there, in the moment as the drill morphs, watch those feet. And so somebody out to the side can play with the hands in order to initiate their sound at the same exact time the battery is initiating theirs. So that's the trick. And incidentally, if the drum line is up front for a feature, a lot of times the drum major will just conduct ahead of the feet of the drum line in order to help the people in the band further back initiate their sound so it all comes forward at the same time. Now, let's say you have tubas way back there. Well, why doesn't the drum line just listen back to the tubas and the drum major watches the tubas' feet? It's a good idea theoretically on paper, but the problem is A, drums, especially those things, are so ridiculously loud you can't hear yourself think, and there's just no room for adjustment. So it has to be so precise on such staccato instruments that they really, for better or for worse, they gotta carry the ball and drive the bus. And incidentally, sometimes we'll use duts. More on duts in a minute, but first, let's go ahead and set up some of the scenarios where we can use the drum major going side to side. So let me move these guys around a bit and we'll be right back. Now you can see our 3 snare drummers are lined up in a line like they'd normally play. So the center snare, or the center of the mass of the drum line sort of cluster, which again changes as forms morph, that person's going to be driving the bus. So Jack is going to play, and he's just stubborn and lays it out, and the other 2 are completely submissive and listen in to Jack in order to match the common denominator. So they're right next to each other, so there's no sound delay issues at all at this point. So Jack, go ahead and tap off and let's hear an attack. Good to go. So now what we're going to do is we're going to move Rachel out onto the next yard line and Ashley out to the next yard line. So now we have a 5-yard gap between each of them, 10 yards total. So let's see if we start to hear some delay here. This is science, so just experiment. Same thing. And again. Okay, it's starting to get a little bit flammy as Jack's tennis ball goes forward to us and side to side to the ladies, who then play a hair later. So now let's exaggerate or exasperate the situation. Go ahead and move 1 more yard line out, please. So now I think you'll hear the sound widen. All right, same thing. And again. Yep, it's getting wider. Just to watch it all work, let's go 1 more. All right, go ahead and spread out 1 more yard line. All right, so we're gonna hear the sound basically get a little bit fatter. Same thing. And 1 more. All right, pretty consistent. So this is where the drum major comes in. At this point, usually about 10 yards is a good rule. There's just too much lateral spread for them to listen across and not experience 2 tennis balls, bap, bap, hitting up front at different times. All right, so now what we're gonna do, I'm gonna conduct, and each one of you just play with the hands, no dutting. You ready? And again. All right, so now that's surprisingly together. All right, so again, this is a situation where hopefully your drill writer does not put you in this situation with incredibly staccato instruments that far apart. If those are flutes, clarinets, trumpets, it's going to be fine because they're not nearly as articulate. There's more forgiveness built into the instrument. So let me talk a minute about duts. I mentioned earlier, duts are just a way to aurally lay out time. So if I conduct, no matter how beautiful my icti are, there's still a little bit of interpretation where the ears, da, 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 you can really, really hear that sharply. So just make sure you don't have everybody dut as loud as they can, like it's a hype, so that the audience hears it. Okay, don't do that. But that's where the duts come in. So sometimes, depending on people's positions on the field, you have to use a lot of different tricks. Sometimes you'll have one section dut with this other section's feet in order to get their entrance. You come up with a lot of weird situations like that. And one final note on the pit up at the very front, their job is to listen back. Because if they're watching the drum major, we go right back to that first scenario where they play before the people behind them. So the pit should pretty much, or front ensemble, sure, they should pretty much always listen back to what's being fed to them. And a scenario where the pit has established something and they're playing some sort of ostinato, and then the battery adds in backfield, that is incredibly hard, a massive roll of the dice, and that's why you rarely see it written that way. A lot of times there will be sort of a fermata, and then the the time will be initiated from backfield such that it's safe. So again, that can be pretty much a written error, something that you need to get around. And incidentally, you have to realize it's also very important that when you're on the field, there are a lot of things you need to not listen to. Do not listen to the pitch sound coming back. Do not listen across very much. So if the battery is behind you, by all means listen forward, but there's a lot of lateral and sound coming from in front of you that you need to absolutely ignore in order to participate throwing your tennis ball accurately in order to line it all up at front of the press box. So that is a whole lot of thoughts on Ensemble. And like I said, there are a lot of tips and tricks, and depending on the drill situation and who's playing and where the battery is, there's a lot of different variables and different situations. But using some of those tricks, you can get it such that everybody throws their tennis ball at the correct time, such that in the press box, your ultimate audience, that all the tennis balls of sound arrive there together. All right, so that's it. Thanks for checking this out. Spread the word. I hope it helps you. And be sure to stop by drumworkout.com, where there's a ton of lessons and a whole lot of actual play-alongs where you work out with me to build up your hands. So check that out, hype on it. And for all you schools out there, we can do some group rates, help you guys get their hands locked in and loving it. All right, that's it. Thank you.